It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the planet, we are Red Eye Radio. Welcome and good morning. He's Eric Harley and I'm Gary McNamara. Things were tense last night. Okay, I'm lying.
It got down to the wire.
for Super Tuesday. We went through some of the numbers earlier. I thought it'd be interesting just to bring up some overall numbers that in the polling that exist now that isn't really talked about a lot, but I think are really key things that should be brought up. And this comes from William Galston's column in the Wall Street Journal.
All right.
Where he talks about the fact that Mr. Trump leads Mr. Biden by between, I'm reading directly from his article, Mr. Trump leads Mr. Biden by between 2 and 5 points nationwide, and the inclusion of minor party and independent candidates modestly expands Mr. Trump's margin. Now, polls are snapshots. They're not predictions. But the correlation between current results and final outcomes will increase as we near the election. Even if there are surprises along the way, and it would be shocking if there aren't any, we can assess the strengths and weaknesses of the major party candidates as the opening gun sounds. Broadly speaking, the coalition that gave Mr. Trump 47% of the vote in 2020 remains intact, while Mr. Biden's winning coalition has frayed significantly, according to the New York Times Siena poll. 97% of those who voted for Mr. Trump 4 years ago intend to do so again in 2024, because the Never-Trumpers weren't voting for him in 2020.
Right.
All right, so 97% who voted for Trump 4 years ago intend to do so again in 2024, compared with 83% for Mr. Biden. 10% of Mr. Biden's former supporters, according to the New York Times Siena poll, say they will switch to Mr. Trump. This helps explain the top-line numbers. You and I, in fact, we did it in a pre-show meeting. I remember you went, whoa, 10% of Biden's voters, according to the poll, will vote.
I thought
I
heard it wrong.
I know. That helps explain the top line number. Mr. Biden outpolled Mr. Trump in 2020 by nearly 4.5 points, but now trails him by 2.1, a 6.6 point swing. Now, the 2.1 is an average of all the different polls, not just one poll. Well, maybe it is. No, I think that's the average of the polls.
Okay.
Key blocks in the Democratic coalition have eroded. In 2020, Mr. Biden won 18 to 29-year-old voters by 24 points. His lead now, less than half. He won in the suburbs by 11 points, but leads only now by 2. His lead among black voters has fallen from 84 points to 43, and it would be a historic shift if Mr. Trump comes anywhere near the 23% support the poll found.
Wow.
So that isn't that all those the black voters that fell from 84 to 43. That's his favorability rating. Okay. What they're saying is Trump now polls 23% approval of black voters.
Okay.
And that's what he's saying. If that is the case, that would be historic. Mr. Biden prevailed among Hispanic voters by 21 points in 2020, but now trails by 6.
Wow.
The results for Hispanics may seem hard to believe. Well, look, when I see that his support for black voters has gone from 84 to 43, I mean, you look at that and you say, well, that's a 41-point swing. Well, you notice Trump isn't picking up 41 points. Right. They may not be favorable towards him, but the majority are still going to vote. But if it increases from probably the mid-teens to 23% support for Trump if that actually mirrors in the election. That in itself would be huge. The result for Hispanics may seem hard to believe, but it's consistent with other findings. Only 16% of Hispanics say that economic conditions are excellent or good, compared to 84% who rate them as fair or poor. Only 31% approve of Mr. Biden's performance as president. 67% disapprove. A tougher approach to immigration is no deal breaker. 45% of Hispanics favor making it harder to seek asylum at the southern border. Nearly as many as the 47% who oppose it. Ideologically, Hispanics are now to the right of the Democratic Party. Only 20% of them describe themselves as liberal, 44% as moderate, and 30% as conservatives. The fraying of Mr. Biden's coalition is evident in the swing states as well. 4 years ago, Mr. Biden prevailed in 6 of the 7 swing states, losing only North Carolina. Now he trails in 6 of them. According to the Real Clear Politics polling averages, leading only in Pennsylvania. Mr. Trump leads by, and by the way, there's a poll out there, one of the most recent polls that shows Trump was leading. Didn't we bring that up a couple of days ago in Pennsylvania, I believe?
Yeah, we did.
Mr. Trump leads by 7.7 points in Nevada, 6.5 in Georgia, 5.7 in North Carolina, 5.5 in Arizona. Wisconsin remains within reach. Mr. Trump's edge, 1 point. This leaves Michigan, which may be pivotal. Biden carried it in 2020 by 2.8 points, but now trails 3.6. If he loses in the South and the Southwest, he will need Michigan to prevail. If he can't overcome the current discontent in Michigan over his support for Israel's campaign in Gaza, Hamas's brutal attack could end up returning Mr. Trump to the Oval Office. You know, another point is, and I've seen a couple of people bring that up and say, you know, you may be making too much of that erosion. Not that it wouldn't be important in Michigan, but they say the real problem in Michigan is EVs.
Yeah. Okay.
Is a unions?
We talked.
Right.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day, and that dynamic. And I said, look, I think there's something else going on in Michigan, and I guess we'll see in November. But all of this is horrible news, and we're still 8 months out for the Biden campaign, and we're still 8 months out. Wow.
And they say if the inflation rate continues to fall, triggering interest rates cuts, and now that's a bigger if than it was even 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
As we run up some of the numbers,
right? You and I were talking about it the other day. You're not hearing that talk as much.
And one of the reasons is you may have other products going down, but the products that people buy, as we've talked about,
right.
Food, which is why he's doing the whole shrinkflation thing.
Yeah.
But when there's a problem that people know is attached to Biden, and he attempts to repackage it, he attempts to repackage it and blame someone else. When you think about that on the border, when he tried to blame Trump, it failed
drastically. Blaming Trump for an open border.
On inflation.
Yeah.
When he attempted, because this isn't the first time. He's repackaging it with shrinkflation, trying to make people think that inflation and shrinkflation are two separate things when they're the exact same thing.
Right.
They're both caused by inflation.
Right.
When he tried to blame, remember, he brought up the greed of corporations. Remember, that's what all the surrogates were saying when inflation started to increase.
Oh, yeah.
They were blaming.
And they're gouging.
Right. Nobody bought it.
Nobody bought that. That didn't work. So now they jump on the shrinkflation thing, which is, of course, inflation.
If the inflation rate continues to fall, triggering interest rates cuts, the recent improvement in the public's assessment of the economy could accelerate. That's always a possibility. That's not where it's headed right now. The president could announce a bold new policy that staunches the bleeding at the southern border.
Yep. Right.
An executive order proving that Trump was right. He may be able to engineer a ceasefire in the Middle East. that takes the pictures of death and destruction off the front page. The House and the Senate may come to an agreement on further aid to Ukraine that would salvage a pillar of the president's foreign policy. On the other side of the ledger, a torrent of Democratic attack ads could remind tuned-out swing voters why they booted Mr. Trump out of office after one term. His conviction of a felony could swing the election to Mr. Biden. This leaves the president's age a focus of much recent polling and agitated discussion by Democratic insiders. Only Mr. Biden can get rid of this concern. He must deliver a forceful State of the Union address, campaign vigorously, accept media interviews he has ducked up until now, and debate Mr. Trump this fall. By declining to stand down at age 81, Mr. Biden has assumed a historic responsibility to his party, his country, and the world. The cost of failure would be
What?
You couldn't calculate the cost of the failure. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. But what?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing that will overpower the arrogance of Joe Biden. These are all things that he thinks, yesterday you saw the clip going around and I'm leading in 5 polls. 5 polls. Yeah. Oh my gosh. By the way, with as many polls as there are out there right now, I thought, okay, that sounds bad. If you're a wonk, you're going, you're only leading in 5. But the thing is, it wasn't 5.
That's not the truth.
No. Yeah. Well, if you go back to summer of last year.
Well,
5 polls. Just show him the polls from last summer. He'll believe he's in the lead. And because the whole thing, the Michelle Obama thing was based on the other narrative that some people are still on. He's not going to be the nominee. He's not going to be the nominee. He's not going to be the nominee. Well, today he is. I don't see his arrogance declining whatsoever. There may be some declines, but that's not one of his declines. He's not going away anytime soon. And
I found it.
What do you got?
I found the audio cut you were talking about.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Mr. President, what's your message to Democrats who are concerned about your poll numbers?
My poll numbers, the last 5 polls you guys don't report. I'm winning. 5 in a row.
5 polls, 5 in a row.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is he talking about?
What is he looking at? Did Sesame Street take a poll? Because there is, by the way, if you're not following along, if you're not a wonk and you don't look at the polls on a regular basis, like a lot of people do, yesterday had people looking, going, oh, I wonder which 5 polls
there was the tip poll that we brought up the other day that he was up by 1, and then the morning consult poll where he was up by.
And when were those
by 1?
When were those?
The last few days.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All registered voters.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, it bears repeating here, we're going to start seeing more and more likely voter polls.
Yeah, the New York Times likely voter poll, which is always viewed as more accurate.
And by the way, in that same moment we just heard,
has Trump up for?
Yeah, he mentioned at one point with that reporter, you guys are always, you're just paying attention to the New York Times. Well, it's a likely voter poll.
Yeah,
and it's the liberal New York Times.
When you see since the middle of, let me see, the beginning of beginning polls that are into February.
Okay.
Trump leads 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Yep.
10, 11, 12,
What I was
13,
mentioning
14,
earlier. Yep.
15, 16, 17,
Yep.
18.
Yep.
18 polls Biden leads in 3, and the 1 was back in the middle of February.
Okay.
Of the last since the middle of February, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 polls Trump leads, Biden leads in
Yep.
2, and the ones that Biden leads both are +1.
Yeah.
And so that's where you look at it and you say, okay, that's why the average is.
And again, we're
right.
8 months out.
Yeah.
We're looking at, you and I always, we don't, the polls aren't gospel, but when we see movement that shows something in one direction or the other, that's what you pay attention to, the movement in the polls. And as I said earlier, when you look from February on, that's where that movement, that positive movement for Trump started happening. And, of course, Biden wants you to believe he's 5 polls.
Well, without any bias here whatsoever, I think the most accurate poll that was taken was last September 15th through September 20th, the ABC News Washington Post poll, where Trump is up by 10.
Last September, he was up by 10?
Up by 10, yeah.
Wow.
Now, if you look in that...
I got to see the methodology on that one.
Oh, I know, but if you look through September and October, Biden is up, and that's what you see.
Yeah.
Trump, not that Trump doesn't win any of the polls, but Biden is up in the majority of polls.
Right.
Back in last September and October.
Right.
And that's when you see the shift. That's where you see the shift happening.
Right. Yep.
And again, these are all
people
registered
are making their
voters.
decision now based on the fact that it's coming down to the 2 more and more. The GOP field is all but done.
Well, and the other thing that you got to take into context is if you add the other candidates, Trump is up by more.
Yeah.
That's
the other candidates that aren't GOP. Yes.
Right. That are actually running.
Right.
And will be on the ballot.
Right.
In most of the states on the ballot. 866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Those vicious wildfires have burned over 1 million acres in the North Texas Panhandle. However,
we are looking at some improvement coming as firefighters continue to work around the perimeters of those fires. There's still a few hot spots burning.
But USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says firefighters may get some help from the weather this week.
We are looking at a cooler weather pattern spreading southward across much of the country. That includes the southern Great Plains. So we will see temperatures returning at least to normal levels, and it looks like the winds will stay down a bit, humidity a little bit higher.
Brad says in some areas, though, there is still a lot of vegetation that could burn.
But at least for the next several days, it looks like the threat of any additional wildfires will be fairly minimal across that region,
giving farmers and ranchers a chance to assess the damage to their farms and to their livestock. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up, this has gone viral again. Not just viral online, but, everywhere. The study that came out a couple of years ago, electric vehicles release more toxic emissions and are worse for the environment than gas-powered cars. It's a study that came out a couple of years ago, but it's been brought back to life this year. And remember, Governor Hochul of New York said, don't worry, we're not going to be going after other businesses besides Trump. Wrong.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Wrong. Wait till you hear this. And she's also threatening a lawsuit against Nassau County, saying you must allow men to play in women's sports.
Wow.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
Shut Radio, he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. We did the story a ways back, I think in 2022. Electric vehicles release more toxic particles into the atmosphere and are worse for the environment than their gas-powered counterparts, according to a resurfaced study. The study published by the emissions data firm Emissions Analytics was released in 2022, but has attracted a wave of attention this week after being cited in a Wall Street Journal op-ed piece on Sunday. It found that brakes and tires on EVs release 1,850 times more particulate pollution compared to modern tailpipes.
It's the weight of the vehicle.
Yep.
The weight of the vehicle puts so much on those tires and the brakes. I don't know at what rate they go through tires, but it's a lot faster than gas-powered engines.
So it found that the brakes and tires on EVs release 1,850 times more particulate pollution compared to modern tailpipes, which have efficient exhaust filters, bringing gas-powered vehicle emissions to new lows. Today, most vehicle-related pollution comes from tire wear, as heavy cars drive on light-duty tires, most often made with synthetic rubber made from crude oil and other fillers and additives. They deteriorate and release harmful chemicals into the air, according to the emissions analytics. And they say because EVs are on average 30% higher, brakes and tires on battery-powered cars wear out faster than on standard cars. Yeah. Emission Analytics found that tire wear emissions on half a metric ton of battery weight in an EV are more than 400 times as great as direct exhaust particulate emissions. Wow.
Okay.
Half a metric ton, 1,100 pounds.
Did they compare? Did they include any tire emissions from gas to go along with the? I know they're comparing the emissions of gas-powered vehicles from the tailpipe, but if you were to measure not only the, I guess my question would be, what is the impact of tire emissions on gas-powered vehicles?
Well,
and would you add that to?
Well, right.
They're
adding, yes, they're adding both. They're I don't have
both.
It specifically here that I'm looking at, but yeah, they add both.
Okay, because we talked about other studies. I don't know if it was this one or not, but that show the emissions overall were still higher with EVs. And by the way, this is during use. We've talked about the delivery of the vehicles. By the time they get to the lot, what it takes to build an EV and the emissions there.
Right.
You have to add that into it.
But we're talking particulate matter, and the whole point they're saying is these cars aren't zero emissions.
Right.
They're saying, well, zero emissions from the tailpipe. Yeah. No, you're not saying that. You're saying it's a zero-emission car, and it's not a zero-emission car.
It's not.
And we've stated this over and over again. That's lying by omission.
It is.
You know, it was the same thing. Remember, was it, I can't remember, was it the hybrid? Was it the hybrid or electric vehicle? Remember they were looking at, the plug-in hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got an electric, you've got the gasoline motor in, you can still plug it in.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying it gets 300 miles to the gallon of gas.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Because you're not counting the energy. If you were counting the energy of it being run just by the gasoline engine, and then how the gasoline engine through the generator charged the batteries, well, then you can make that claim.
You need to factor the equivalent.
Right, because all of the power is coming from the gasoline engine.
Right. They stopped doing that, by the way, because they were called out on it.
But as soon as you plugged it in, you can't make that. They were called out on it. We called them out on it.
Right.
That goes back, 12, 13, 14 years ago?
I think
they were doing that?
I think the one example we used was what they were promoting for the Chevy Volt at the time. I think that was our example then, or just one example we used. But yeah, they changed that practice because they got way too much pushback. Well, here's the thing, politically, the left with all of this technology and the mandates behind it, they think, okay, we've won over the activists. Now the activists are in our corner. They're the loudest. Well, the activists keep going. Net zero is not zero. Greta, you talk like you're going to do something. You're not actually doing something. The point being, it doesn't matter what mandate you put into place. Number one, we're never going to be able to reach the mandate on EVs. That's not going to happen. But number two, the goalpost is moving every day with environmentalists. There's always something in play with them. So now it's lithium and silver and cobalt mining and everything else it takes. By the way, that we kind of pointed out from the beginning. Hey, are you including everything in the equation of the mining of the materials, the delivery of the finished product to the destination point, the retail level? And then on top of that, the life of what the emissions is, the life usage of what the emissions is going to be? Well, no, they weren't. Why? Because you can't. Because we're not going to get off this blue marble without leaving a footprint.
I think one thing they have to Google, because I've gone through 3 articles here. I went to Google because you make a great point that you need to, in these articles, point out that the tailpipe emissions plus the particulate matter that comes from the brakes and the tires, the entire amount of the gasoline vehicle, and then compare it to an EV.
Because my new truck is heavy. The reason, you and I talk about it, we want to be, look, let's do the real science here. I don't want to leave I don't have an agenda here. I just want to get to the truth. I don't believe this technology is going to be available to us on the wide scale in terms of, a grid and everything else we'll need. The materials that will need to be mined in such a short period of time. We want to talk about the facts. We go back to ethanol. The farm to pump is what we focused on. And eventually Al Gore got around to admitting that he lied when he ran in 2000, that ethanol was not a good thing. It took him 10 years to do that, but he did it. And so I look at it and, my new pickup truck it's pretty heavy. And so if you're doing the science, then you would have to include all the emissions from the gas-powered vehicle, including tires.
The fact is, with the new filters, what they're saying is that, they actually compared hybrid. The electric car weighed about 1/3 more than the hybrid and emitted roughly 1/4 more particulate matter because of tire wear. Total direct emissions went up, not down, when the electric car was driven. But when California's analyzed the effects of its ban, it used a model that assumed both kind of cars have the same tire wear, which it doesn't. And they're saying that the particulate matter that comes out of the tailpipe, because of the new catalytic converters, filters, and everything else, is like 1/1000th of a gram per mile driven, that it's so low that it's almost negligible. And so what they're saying is that because you produce a hybrid, still has batteries in and all that, still has tire wear, how does it compare to a gasoline car? You've got to make that. But I think what they're trying to say is, if you've got now again, you can have a plug-in hybrid will have, do all hybrids have batteries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I just thought about it. Okay, so you've got that extra battery weight there, but in electric,
it's not the same weight as an EV, but yeah.
Which they say that electric car weighed about 1/3 more than the hybrid, emitted roughly 25% more particulate matter than because of the tire wear. So they didn't even check brakes wear on this for that particular one.
Right.
But they believe, again, the brake works harder because it's heavier.
Right.
And so there are hardly any particulate matter coming out of the tailpipe, which is why they're making that assumption.
Right.
because if it's a quarter greater than hybrid, it's greater than gasoline-powered cars,
Right.
which means there's more particulate matter coming out, which really, when you talk about smog and air pollution, that's what air pollution was.
Well, you and I have been focused on this for a long time because particulate matter has been a big deal in the trucking industry with Class 8 engines and the evolution of Class 8 engines going back to 2002 and changes there with EGR and then SCR, Common Rail, and everything else, that got us to where we are now. And all of those things are, at first they were about emissions. Then it was, fuel usage and efficiency, and, you just keep moving the goalpost. Well, when it comes to emissions, even Class 8 engines, the particulate matter coming out of those engines, if they're operating properly, is very, very, very low.
And very quickly here, this was Wall Street Journal editorial board. Letitia James anti-business model. The New York AG sues a meat company because it sells too much meat. New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared the state would not target businesses with political cases after winning the $454 million judgment against Donald Trump. That vow didn't last long. Last week, the Attorney General charged the world's largest beef producer, JBS USA, with misrepresenting its carbon emissions. Quote, the JBS Group has profited from its fraudulent and illegal business activities across New York State, the AG claims in a lawsuit filed in state court. Pray tell, how? Her argument is that eating beef is bad for the climate and that JBS duped customers.
Yeah.
Look at this. JBS duped customers into buying its products by making overly ambitious pledges to cut emissions. Seriously, that's the case.
Wow. And it's fraud.
Yep.
Breaking the law. Illegal, she says.
Beef has the highest total greenhouse gas emissions of any major food commodity. The lawsuit notes, and livestock production contributes about 32% of the methane emissions each year. JBS says it plans to become net zero by 2040.
Not zero.
But Miss James complains that JBS didn't quantify its so-called Scope 3 emissions from suppliers and customers. Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
In any case, neither New York nor federal law says companies must disclose their greenhouse gas emissions.
Doesn't matter. We say it's fraud. It's fraud. We're coming after you. We'll shut you down.
So they're saying this is our goal. Well, you're not keeping up with your goal. That's fraud.
Yep.
There you go.
Told you.
By the way...
That didn't take long at all.
By the way, JBS USA, all I have to say is Fort Worth, Texas.
Come on in. Cowtown. That's what they call it. We know what beef is all about.
No self-awareness that you're going to drive businesses right out
It's
of.
just unbelievable.
And then
if she goes forward on this, this will be it. Because this demonstrates a pattern. After, as you mentioned, Governor Hochul saying, oh, no, we only hate Donald Trump. We don't hate every business, just the Trump business. Wrong.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. And then A.G. James in New York threatens a lawsuit over Nassau County over girls' sports. The New York Attorney General is demanding that Nassau County stop protecting girls' sports from boys.
Wow. Stop.
The order's immediate effect is to force sports leagues to make it an impossible choice, discriminate against transgenders, and you're in violation of New York law, or find somewhere else to play, a cease and desist letter was sent. So now New York wishes to, as do all Democrats on a national front, wants boys to compete against girls in sports. These people are insane.
Title IX is over.
Yes.
Done.
These people are misogynist or self-misogyny in the case of James.
Yeah. Right.
They're misogynist.
Yep.
What else? Oh, femophobia.
Yeah.
They're femophobes. I got to have the phobe in there.
Yeah.
They're femophobes
Because you
and
can't have
misogynists.
feminists these days.
And they're against all women's rights that they claimed for decades they were for.
She's acting against it.
Yep.
It's not just a threat. Think about this. Wow.
Plus, the whole point is there's no difference between boys and girls.
Right. Yeah.
They're insane.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.